All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Virtual Science Cafe. I am your host. My name is Chris Smith. I'm curator for the Daily Planet Theater at the wonderful North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in and joining us for tonight's program. Listen, we've got an exciting show for you tonight, one that I think you're really going to love and enjoy because we've got some superstar guests with us tonight for the show, for the Virtual Science Cafe. Tonight, I am joined by Osearch, which you've probably heard of them, but Chris Fischer and Bob Hueter. Chris Fischer is the founding chairman and expedition leader for Osearch, and Bob Hueter is the chief scientist at Osearch. Now, if you're not real sure what Osearch is, well, we're going to learn a whole lot about it tonight, but we're going to be diving into shark science. That's right. I said diving into, and I didn't even mean to throw a pun in there, but I did. So, so that's how it's going to be. Now, back in 2017, Chris joined us for the Science Cafe in person at the museum, and we got the chance to learn a lot about the work of OCEARCH, the science that goes on, the way that they partner with communities and with researchers to get shark science and shark conservation done, to get action for sharks. It was quite inspiring to learn about work that's happening even off the coast of North Carolina. And so tonight, it's really exciting to bring Chris back and hear about what's happened since then a little bit, what's happening now, and what's going on with OCEARCH, as well as to hear from Chief Scientist Bob Hueter. So, Chris, how are things?
Things are good. We're all doing the best we can to make it through these difficult times. I'm sorry we're not all there in person together, but at least we are finding a way to gather and continue to get our work done. We do have a full expedition schedule this year. We are doing our 3 expeditions. The next one is in August, and then following that in September. And so, we just feel strongly that the science must proceed. This data is important to make sure our great grandkids see an ocean full of fish. And so we are finding a way to manage through it and still get the work done on the water for Bob and his team.
I mean, it sounds like physical distancing on a boat by yourself out in the ocean with just a team of scientists and experts shouldn't be too difficult, right?
It's doable. When you work on the ocean, your whole life is basically built around mitigating and managing risk, right? And so this just is another layer for that, for something that we're dealing with all the time, whether it's big equipment, big seas, big animals. This is just another issue for us. So we're constantly thinking about mitigating risk. That's how we've completed 37 expeditions around the world with, no real big injury. And so for us, mitigating a new type of risk is kind of something that we're in the middle of doing all the time when we're on the ocean. And so we've put our plan together in place, and our great grandkids got no time for us to be shut down, not figuring out these puzzles that affect abundance. And we feel strongly about getting the work done. So we're going to find a way.
Excellent stuff. And Dr. Bob, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm talking to you from, well, I wish I was talking to you from what's behind me. This is the Osearch research platform, and that's our master fisherman, Captain Brett McBride, over my left shoulder, and that's a beautiful big white shark named Unamaki that we tagged up in Nova Scotia last year that we're still tracking. But I'm talking to you actually from Sarasota, where my home institution, Mote Marine Laboratory, is. And it's great. It's great to be connecting with you and the people of North Carolina. And I have a sister right there in Raleigh. I hope she's watching. So I'm ready to get into the science and talk a little bit about what we do.
That sounds great. I want to remind all of our viewers that as we learn more, as we hear about their experiences and insight, feel free to leave your questions, comments, thoughts in the chat over on the side. Or in the comments if you're watching on Facebook, and we'll be keeping an eye on those. And when we get to the end of the presentation, we'll grab those questions and pose them to tonight's guests. All right. Chris, Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Bob, why don't I get us started here? I'm going to try to get through this presentation, in a half an hour or so we have plenty of time for questions. It's always kind of a bummer when you don't leave enough time at the end for people to really answer their questions, especially for the local people down there that are living right in the middle of the North Atlantic white shark puzzle. I guess this journey began for us on the water a long time ago. There was a time before OCEARCH. I started working on the water with Captain Brett McBride in the late 90s. We were working on the water, making television shows really about big game fishing. And we started to learn that the scientists needed help. The scientists, they lack resources. They oftentimes don't have boats. They lack money. And a lot of times they actually have a difficult time or don't know how to capture what they actually study. We had gotten very good at capturing and releasing large things while we're doing the show Offshore Adventures on ESPN Outdoors. And I started to help the people who studied billfish and other species, things we were catching and releasing anyway during the program, because it didn't really cost us any more money to throw a scientist in a bunk. And we could capture the fish, do what we needed to do, and then step out of the way, let the scientists handle their science. And we could radically accelerate how quickly they were able to collect their data, because we were capturing and releasing a lot of fish. We were good at it. We knew how to operate on the water. And a lot of those scientists didn't have access to that sort of resource. It might take them years to tag 10 animals, and maybe we captured and released 40 of those same animals in just a couple of months. Really started doing that, really started enjoying kind of making business and doing good at the same time. Enjoyed accelerating the rate of data collection. While we were helping those people around 2006 or so, they all started to talk to us about this major shark problem that we were having on our oceans. We were losing a tremendous amount of sharks. We were losing up to 250,000 sharks a day, up to 100 million a year, primarily for shark fin soup in Asia. And we were down, some people said, to about 9% of our large sharks left in the ocean. And at the time, I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? We didn't catch sharks. We were very good at catching and releasing large marlin, large tuna, wahoo, mahi, all these kinds of things. And they started to explain to me that if we lose our sharks and our large sharks, the second tier of the food chain then makes a massive impact on everything below it. When you think about a white shark, yes, it's not necessarily always about what they consume. It's about their mere presence affecting the behavior of the next tier of the food chain. I think the easiest way to understand that is to talk about things like squid and seals. So one white shark can keep hundreds of seals pinned on the beach if it's there swimming up and down the beach. Those seals won't go out in the water because they know they might get taken by the shark. If that white shark is not there, we know those seals will eat 4 times more per day than they do if that white shark is there. Because if it's there, they wait till they're almost starving, they go out, they get a little bit of food, they jump back out of the water. If the white shark is not present, they can go and feed at their leisure, and they'll wipe out the cod, the lobster, the salmon, the stripers, the mackerel. In the open ocean, you see things like when you have a good shark population, when the squid migrate to the surface every night, the mere presence of the sharks keeps the squid down. Yeah, sharks eat a lot of squid, but their mere presence keeps the squid down. That allows all of our baby tuna, baby mahi, baby billfish to grow up to become big enough to avoid the squid. If the sharks are not there, the squid just have an all-you-can-eat smorgasbord. There's nowhere for that fry out there, those small fish that we need to grow up. There's nowhere for them to hide. And the squid will wipe out the fry. And then there's no fish to grow up for us to consume in the future. That's why oftentimes you'll hear me say things like, this is about fish sandwiches. This is about lobster rolls. That's why we study sharks. I'm not a shark guy. I am an abundance person. I want to make sure everyone's grandkids can eat fish sandwiches and lobster rolls. And it's just a path to that goes through sharks, because a healthy shark population, much like the wolf in Yellowstone, a healthy shark population, it helps you manage the whole food chain. You can't really manage the food chain if you can't manage the top of the food chain. That is why we started getting into the shark situation and what those scientists explained to me at the time. And the reason we pivoted to do the work was I said, well, let's manage the sharks back. Where are they mating? Where are they giving birth? How do they migrate? That's what we were trying to learn about billfish at the time. And they said, well, we don't know. The animals are so big. The science community has not had safe access to leverage the most modern technology to solve that puzzle to bring these sharks back. And that's when we pivoted, because we had had our fun on the water. She'd given us a lot of beautiful sunsets, sunrises, amazing fishing and experiences. Captain Brett and I had, started to start families. And we really felt like if we gave back to the ocean of the rest of our lives, we still wouldn't be able to give her as much as she'd already given us. So we pivoted to start to fishing for research and enable science teams. And that's really how the origins of Osearch began. It's really about fish sandwiches. And it's just the path to the fish sandwich goes through our sharks. And that's the fish sandwiches I'm talking about for our great grandkids. So when they were talking about managing back, we go to the next slide, Bob, they were talking about that these real big challenges that they have was we're running out of time and we don't have the data to manage. So we knew we could accelerate the rate of data collection by helping the scientists. We were helping around billfish, primarily black marlin, striped marlin. And we needed to help them get that data so that they could publish their peer-reviewed papers. And what really stunned me is that then once we started the work, I learned about the traditional approach to research. Is kind of stunning to me. The system is very inefficient. The system of science, because the scientists are forced into the situation where they must publish or perish, which basically means they need to do their projects in secret, get ahead of the other scientists, publish their papers before the other scientists so that they can win the grant game, they can get more grants. What that did was that system forced the scientists into these individual silos where they couldn't share their data. They had to do their work in secret because they're trying to get ahead of the other scientists to publish first. And they couldn't involve the community in what they were doing, again, because it had to be secret. That was their edge, to create data and get ahead. And so it created this very inefficient system where, an individual scientist, from the time they raise money, do their work, and then write and publish a paper, it might take, 7 years. And then, if there's some way to leverage that paper for policy, nobody knows about it. So then you have to go out and educate people, help them understand why it matters. And then you can move to affect policy. And that just didn't make any sense to me, coming from someone who wasn't coming up in the system. And it was slowing things down. And it had created this system which some people have written about, called the environmental policy paradox, which basically means we know what we need to do. We just don't have the will and the capacity to get it done, because the system was undermining just a pure approach. If we could just bring people together with a great grandchildren first disposition, ocean first, and strip away this silly system, strip away everything else, and build the most efficient system to overcome the data deficit and time gap, we can still win. Otherwise, the old system, we're just going to kind of slowly go down the toilet bowl in a lot of the areas of the world because we can't learn fast enough. And that's this concept of the environmental policy paradox, which has been crippling in the space for a long time. And so we decided to develop a new way of doing things, one that had nothing to do with old rules. And so we developed a model where, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring all the scientists together who study these animals, and we are going to bring world-class watermen, people who work and live on the water, been so all their life, they know how to operate. We have the capacity of the ship. We're going to get a collaborative team of scientists, not individual scientists, all with different disciplines. So we can capture animals they can't capture and give them safe access. So and then we can collect the data we need for all 21 research projects off of every animal we touch, and then let it go. Now, if each one of those scientists was working individually, they would have to catch 21 white sharks to get the same data set. And they likely wouldn't even be able to catch one unless they were partnered with someone who actually lives and works on the water full time. And so, first of all, for me, that was just shark first. That was just ocean first. Like, if we're going to capture something, it's kind of like your obligation to learn as much as possible from it when you let it go. Therefore, you can solve the puzzle touching the least amount of animals. Because we need to not only just track these animals, we got to know what they're doing where they are. And that's where all these multidisciplines come in that we'll talk about. You need someone looking at their hormones. You need someone looking at sperm motility. You need so that you can figure out not only where they are, but what they're doing where they are. And we have a whole suite of projects about that we'll go through. But then here's where it kind of went to another level. So now we had this collaborative team. That makes sense, right? It's efficient. And then this whole idea of having it be kind of quiet and the public didn't know about it. If we're going to create an ocean we're proud to deliver to the future, it's going to take us all, right? There's no one individual group that's going to do that. It's going to take everybody. So what we started to do in 2012 was we said, hey, we're not only going to collaborate, we're going to start open sourcing this data to the public so that they can be in the research project in real time. So that when the papers pop on all of these different projects, which will be 20 papers in 7 years instead of one, right? When that happens, everybody understands they've been in the education curve. They've been part of it. Why, if we need to make a policy move, they'll understand why we need to. The policymakers are in it, and we can move to affect change sooner. So this allows us to tack 20 projects in the same period of time as the one and skip the educational component of the public, because the public and the policymakers were in it from the very beginning. So it increases the rate of data collection and publishing about 30-fold. And that's how you overcome this initial problem of data deficit and time problems. So we all collaborate, the practical and the academic are coming together, the street smarts and the book smarts, right? The fishermen, the scientists. We include the public in the journey, so they're part of it all along through the tracker and other things. When the papers pop, everyone understands if we need to make a move on policy, because that's what the data suggests, why we need to do it, and we can move much, much quicker. And it has proved to be a much more efficient system, and we're going to show you some results of that at the end. And it allows everybody to be involved. It's a democratization of the space. So now I think we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to actually get into the North Atlantic white shark puzzle, which I think is probably why most all of you all are here. In this white shark puzzle, you're going to see us unfold. First thing you want to understand, and maybe Bob, why don't you chime in on these things that the whole team that you manage is focused on, so people can understand the breadth of the science that occurs on every shark.
Sure. So as Chris showed in previous slides, we actually are running 21 projects in parallel, studying this fascinating predator that we actually know very little about in the North Atlantic. A lot more work has been done in the Eastern Pacific and South Africa. Osearch was in South Africa and helped with studies there, but the North Atlantic studies of this animal have lagged far behind, which is ironic considering that the movie Jaws took place in the Northwest Atlantic. But we're trying to play catch up, and so by using the Osearch model, instead of doing one shark and one scientist at a time, we're engaging 33 leading scientists running these 21 projects, and they're coming from about 21 different research institutions. And the list of projects is on the left there. I'm not going to go through them all, but I know that you all know us very well for the tracking side. You see the shark tracker on your smartphone. You see it on our website, and you know that we track sharks by attaching satellite tags to them and follow them in real time. But what you probably don't know is all of these other things that happen, because the tracking is maybe 5% of the science that we're doing. So we're doing everything from looking at assessing the population, understanding the total range in the Northwest Atlantic, using genetics to tell us how that group is related to other populations. We've got a number of people looking at the reproductive biology of these animals, their cycles, hormone cycles. That's going to tell us eventually where these animals are mating and also where they're giving birth. We're looking heavily at the health of the animals themselves, environmental threats. And so we're taking samples, blood samples from the animals, looking at heavy metals, things like microplastics, which is really, as you probably know, is a big issue now in our oceans. Feeding ecology, what these animals are eating in different parts of their range and places that we work. And then going all the way down to the little critters that live in and on white sharks, microbiology. Some of our scientists are developing antibiotics from the microbes that they get from white sharks, and they're also testing antibiotics against some of these microbes, the ones that are found in the mouth and on the teeth, because when someone gets bitten by a white shark, infection is a real problem. So that raises the priority that we have is even beyond the sharks themselves. We're really working on public safety issues, because we're trying to advise the medical community how to deal with shark bites, and we're tracking these animals in near real time, and that's going to show people who are using the beaches where the sharks are, and when to try to avoid them. And we do this in a sort of a pit crew approach with every shark that Captain McBride and his great team bring us up on the platform of the Osearch. We bring the animal up on the platform. You're going to see that in a second, and take 15 to 20 minutes to take all these various samples. We've got a great scientific crew that sort of works all over the shark and takes measurements, and then everybody knows their job. It's very exciting, but when you have experience, you just sort of lock into this sort of work mode. And I think afterwards, when you're all done, that's when the rush of adrenaline comes, and you realize that you've just been dealing with a 14, 16-foot great white shark. But you see all the different samples that we take there, and the blood samples, it says in the beginning and the end, that's critical, because we use the measurements in those blood samples to tell us the stress level of the animal. And we find that these animals actually on the lift, their stress is either stable or it goes down. And you'll see our method here in the next video.
So when we talk about the beginning and data deficit in time, prior to 2012, there was some sightings data, and there was some kind of rudimentary might not be the right word, but there were some tracks of a few animals from older technology. But this is an example really of the real-time data set we had in 2012 of white sharks moving around the East Coast of the United States. As you can see, we have a data deficit problem. There is no data off the East Coast. Visually just wanted to see where we started in 2012. In 2012, we began our work, and we tagged a few sharks off the northeastern United States and Massachusetts: Mary Lee, Catherine, Betsy, and Jeannie, named after the great Jeannie Clark. And then we cruised, and Mary Lee led us down to Jacksonville, Florida, where we tagged Lydia. And that was where your part of the country really started to come into play. Nobody really had a good handle on how important the southeastern United States was to white sharks. They seemed to be spending more time there really than anywhere in this area between Cape Hatteras and Cape Canaveral. And so in the next slide, we just want you all to see all this different science at work. This is a shark we caught, I think, last year, but it'll give you an example of what this multidiscipline collaborative team looks like, how we capture the shark, and how they go about doing their work. And then we'll dig in, we'll show you a little bit more of a time lapse of all the scientists doing their work. So let's go to that next slide and run that film, Bob.
Great to see this male shark come in. It's the second shark here at West Ironbound. The big question was, is there predictable access when we started this week? We were hoping to see a shark or two to know that we could come back here in the future and make progress in the research. We're going to name this beautiful 11'8" mature male white shark Ferg after Ray Ferguson. He's the founder of Costa Sunglasses and was a true visionary. He saw, even over 20 years ago, that he wanted to start a company and make world-class glasses for people on the water and do good and work toward the future abundance of the ocean at the same time. So we're going to call this one Ferg. Rest in peace, Ray. Much love.
When you go to this next slide, this is a time lapse we can just keep running over and over again. This will show you, so there's the fisherman, there's Captain Brett, we bring the shark in. Now look at all these scientists coming around, working in unison around this one shark. This is how we are able to just explode the rate of data collection. We start with the shark on its side, right? We always bring the sharks in on their side. We've never caught a pregnant white shark before, but we want to make sure of that. So we always bring them in on their side first and ultrasound them before we roll them over. So we do all of that work you see there on the side. And as fat as that shark looks, that's a male white shark, right? That's not a female. The females are much bigger. And you can see that having them on the lift and being able to get around the animal allows all these scientists to do all this different work at the same time. And this is how you do something different, right? We're stuck in this challenge of data deficit and time. We're not learning fast enough to turn a lot of these populations around. We're slowly going down the toilet bowl. So you can't keep doing things the same way, right? We all know what the definition is of someone who does the same thing and expects a different result, right? So we come in, this is very different. Scientists are collaborating, the community is involved. We are all in it together, and we are doing it a new way with simply, we have two questions we ask ourselves in our approach. Is it ocean first? And is it great-grandchildren first? And when we don't know what to do, those are the criteria. And if it's not ocean first, we don't do it. When I say ocean first, that also means shark first. And if it's not in the interest of the long-term abundance, if it's not great-grandchildren first, we don't do it. So this concept of hoarding data, concept of hoarding a region, this concept of an individual approach trying to win in the space for their own individual journey, all of those things don't pass that test. Only thing that passes it is collaboration, open sourcing, and inclusion. And that is really how this process kind of evolved. And every time we were, should we do this? Should we do that? We tested it against those core values. And we continue to do that today with every different move we make and everything we want to add to the program. And I think it's really amazing when you see a time lapse like this, where it's the only place in the world where you can get all of these scientists moving around an animal like this safely to get so much data so quickly. And it has been transformational. Now on this very same trip, when we go to the next slide, it might have even been this shark, we were doing our ultrasounding. And for the first time in history, we were able to get the resting heartbeat of a white shark, which I think surprised us all. We got the ultrasound on the next slide, Bob.
Yeah, and Chris, before we make that move, I know there's a lot of people out there who really care about the shark itself and how it's doing. I want you to notice that as soon as the shark comes on the lift, it gets water put in its mouth, so fresh flowing oxygenated seawater, the wet towel over the eyes and the gill slits, and we keep the body wet through the whole process. And this is what keeps the animal cool, and you don't see anywhere in this sequence the animal trying to flail around or resist. So we have learned, and our crew has learned how to do this, and these animals are in great shape. And getting the heartbeat was an amazing thing with our ultrasound machine. So this is the first image of a white shark heart in the wild, taken with our ultrasound equipment that we have on the ship by our head veterinarian. So we do have a chief veterinarian on every single expedition on every fishing day. And the heartbeat is very, very slow. We were very amazed to see how slow the rate is. It's only about 6 to 8 beats per minute. And this shows you that this is a very calm animal, a very relaxed animal. And then when it's released, it just continues on its merry way. And we can see that through the satellite tracking data. So back to you.
I think since we're talking and we got the heart rate up, since we're talking to a lot of Carolina folks down there, which I know the Carolina boys pride themselves in being world-class fishermen. One thing you can see about the resting heartbeat about this thing, it's very interesting when we catch these sharks now. When we capture a white shark, typically there is no big fight. We've gotten to the point now where when a white shark picks up a bait, we don't really pull back on it. We try to, for as long as we can, not let the animal know that it's actually caught. So, they'll pick up a bait, they'll start to pull some buoys. We'll pick up the buoy, the furthest buoy from the animal, so we're probably 30 to 40 feet away from the animal. And we'll start to just barely tug on it. We go up super quiet and we try to sneak up on it and we barely pick up that buoy. And then we try to start walking toward the ship. And a lot of times you can just hold these buoys with your fingertips and put a little bit of pressure and the animal will just keep swimming, and you can steer it back toward the ship. And then you can walk an animal like that for a mile, and it will almost not even know it's hooked. It'll just be kind of, you slowly tugged on the corner of its mouth to get it going the right way. And then it'll walk back to the ship. And then at the very last minute, we'll tighten up on the animal, put the buoys very close to its nose so we can swing it into the lift and it doesn't dive underneath. And that's why we're seeing these outrageously low stress levels. There is no big fight. We will capture a 1,000-pound shark in 1 minute. If it's a 4,000-pound shark, it might take us 40 minutes or 35 minutes. But that's just because they're a little bigger to handle at the end. So this is not a game of brawn and strength and overpowering. This is a game of subtle cleverness. I would actually say we don't really catch white sharks anymore. We quickly train them. It's more like teaching a dog how to heel. And then they will kind of give up and do whatever you want. Obviously, a 1,000-pound shark is not tired in 6 minutes. A 4,000-pound shark is not tired in 30. They could fight you for multiple days if they had to. But if you handle them the right way, you can kind of get them up in there into the lift, and they don't even almost know it's occurring. And I think this heart rate is a real demonstration of that. If this animal was under tremendous stress, right, its heart rate would be going boom, 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 boom. It would be beating like a drum, right? We got it in the cradle. This thing's beating 6, 8, times a minute. It's clearly relaxed and not overstressed. And I think that's the one misinterpretation, I think, is how involved the fishing team and Captain Brett is with our chief scientist, Bob Hueter, and his team in understanding the sharks so that we can then integrate that with the practical knowledge of working on the water like Brett, and then put the whole thing together in kind of the most world-class package you can with the least impact on the sharks. And this was fascinating to all of us. We knew we weren't putting much pressure on the sharks. We knew that they were basically choosing to come in, not fighting until they were tired. And when we all saw this, I think as fishermen, we were like, yeah, man, we got that thing in the cradle and its heart's only beating 6, 8 times a minute. It's not pumping 50, 80 times a minute. And I think that's a real testament to Captain Brett and his team. So now when you take this big collaborative approach, this is the data set we now have on 55 white sharks tagged in the North Atlantic since 2012. And when you remember and you think back to that first slide I showed you, there was no data. Now look at this data set, right? Wow, this is because of collaboration and being great-grandchildren first. First of all, we had no idea back in the day in 2012 how much time these white sharks are spending off your coast. Your coast is a critical part of the whole North Atlantic white shark puzzle. Remember what we spoke about. As the North Atlantic white shark goes, the whole eastern seaboard's abundance goes, right? You live in a critical place. You're doing very well with the management of your resources there for the most part. That's why the white sharks are spending a lot of time there. There's an abundant resource for them to come in and balance, cull the weak, the dead, and the dying, so the stocks are stronger, right? Modify the behavior of the squid. One day in the future, probably when you have seals back, they'll be modifying the future of the behavior of those seals to make sure they don't wipe out all the fish we need for commercial and recreational industries, and so our kids can go swimming and see a lot of fish and enjoy an abundant ocean. Tremendous to see, though, that these white sharks are spending more time between Cape Hatteras and Cape Canaveral than probably anywhere else in the North Atlantic for an extended period of time. Completely did not know that or understand that from a scientific standpoint and a data standpoint back as late as 2013, 2014. So huge leap forward just by being collaborative and open sourcing and including the world in the journey. And I think, one thing is, why don't we go, Bob, to this next slide and you tell people what we're teasing out of this data. I think this is exciting.
Okay, so Chris just showed you the big picture where all of our 56 sharks have gone in the almost 8 years that we've been running this project with some interruptions in the middle. We now know a few things about the life history of the white shark that we didn't know before we started. And we call this the Northwest Atlantic White Shark Model, the model for their lives, basically from birth to old age. And we know now we were able to help confirm that the primary nursery area, the area where white sharks are born, is off this New York Bight area off of Long Island. That was known through some fishery interaction work and some work by a guy named Jack Casey back in the 60s all the way into the 80s. But we confirmed that it's a true nursery area because by putting tags on the little young of the year sharks there, the newborn babies, we showed that they stay in this nursery area. They're not just passing through. But when they're ready to leave in the fall, they, of course, head south. No big surprise there. And guess what? They come down right past your coast in North Carolina and set up shop all along the southeast area that Chris said was so important. And they spend the winter time down there feeding, growing, eventually moving back to their nursery area. And over time, over years, they expand their range back and forth in this critical part of the US East Coast and the continental shelf. Eventually expanding it to include all the way from Newfoundland and beyond up in Canada to the north, down to all the way around the Florida Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico. And notice that by and large, most of these locations are up on the continental shelf. These are basically continental shelf loving animals, and they love to be up right against the coastline in a number of places in the Carolinas, all the way down to the east coast of Florida in the wintertime, and then wrapping around into the Gulf of Mexico, where they stay off of our continental shelf here. I'm right here in Sarasota, and they don't seem to like it in here, but they do like it right at the continental slope. Good feeding out there. But all this space, and the males will go back and forth as they get larger and larger, back between places to the south in wintertime and all the way up into these places in the north in the summertime. And the special places for them that we know of through our tracking include such well-known spots as Cape Cod off of Massachusetts, where the white shark population is going up in numbers here at Cape Cod, where they're feeding on the gray seal and other sources of very rich food. And then we discovered through our work, watching our sharks swim up to the parts of Atlantic Canada, we discovered that Nova Scotia was very important. We took the ship up there back in '88. I should say Chris took the ship up there. It was his leadership and his courage to have us move up there and expend the funds to get up there. And lo and behold, we were very successful in Nova Scotia in finding white sharks there. We just published a paper about the white shark in Atlantic Canada with a group from the University of Windsor in Canada that's showing that there's really a very vibrant population of white sharks there.
And the first trip up there was 2018, Bob. You said 88.
I thought I said, I meant to say 18. 2018. Yeah, 2018, sorry. So this is the core of the Northwest Atlantic population. This is their range. But on the southernmost part now, we have now named the Northwest Atlantic Shared Foraging Area, NASFA, because this is where they kind of come together. If they spend the summer in Cape Cod, or they skip past Cape Cod and they go to Nova Scotia, or perhaps even beyond, doesn't matter. They still seem to come together in this very broad area off the southeast coast, including off the coast of the Carolinas. This is the NASFA region that we work in our studies in the wintertime, in the late winter and early spring. So again, males and females doing this back and forth, back and forth. The males pretty much hang out and stick with this. But then every once in a while, we see these big loops. You see these long traverses offshore, even going out past the mid-Atlantic ridge in the case of a wonderful shark named Lydia, but a lot of activity around Bermuda and in this area of the open ocean. And the model that we're working on, the hypothesis that we're working on is these are the pregnant females. They're getting impregnated here in the core part of the range. then they're saying, see you later, I don't want to bother with you anymore, and they're heading out offshore and doing most of their gestation out in this warm water of the North Atlantic gyre. Now, Chris, did you want to comment any more on that, or should I move on to some?
No,
of
I think
the
that's
science?
great. I think this is just an interesting factoid that we're picking up. I think one of the things that's most powerful about the OCEARCH operation and the collaborative team. The collaborative team is built up of scientists that stretch all the way from Atlantic Canada down through your region and into Florida and over into the Gulf. So instead of each scientist only getting samples from their area, getting the same samples over and over again, we're able to move the scientists with the ship across the whole range of the white shark. And what that means is they can compare what the data looks like around a white shark that's in Atlantic Canada, or off Massachusetts, to the data set that we get off the southeastern United States on the same body of sharks, and see what's going on differently in those different regions. And this is an example of that, which Bob will take you through.
So this, I want to emphasize, these are preliminary data. One of our wonderful scientists, Lisa Crawford from Stony Brook University. Lisa's a PhD student. She's an up and coming shark star in the science world, and Lisa's work looks at the levels of mercury of these contaminants in the tissues of sharks, and she basically takes muscle samples and then analyzes them for total mercury. And each of these graphs, we're not going to show you too many graphs tonight, but these are a few. Each of these graphs has total mercury on the y-axis here, and then in this case, this is location. So here's Nova Scotia, here's the southeast, and you can see that the means for the total mercury in those animals differs apparently significantly. Again, this is preliminary, but it looks like the ones up there are loaded with more mercury.
And so what's the difference, right? Is it that they have a different diet? Is what's going on? But what we're seeing is the animals have more toxins in their system when they're up in the north than they do when they're down off your coast. You couldn't do that if you were an individual scientist collecting this data in the north or in the south and you weren't connecting the dots, right?
And that's also shown in their growth pattern, because as they grow in length, this is precaudal length, where they grow in girth, their weight, their heft, you can see that the Nova Scotia curves are going up faster than the southeast curves down here. So there's something about the food. It's probably the seals that they're eating up there, and we're looking at something called bioaccumulation happening here, where something like mercury, a heavy metal that is a contaminant that starts low on the food chain, accumulates as it makes its way up through that food web that Chris showed, that pyramid, and eventually the sharks, unfortunately, are the heaviest recipients of it. And could potentially be a problem that we have to monitor in the future to ensure the health of these animals as we rebuild them.
So as you know, for everyone out there who's not a scientist, I'm always trying to talk, and I'm not a scientist, but when you're at the top of the food chain, right? The little fish has contaminant in it. Bigger fish eats it, all it goes up to that one. Bigger fish eats it, all the contaminants go up. When you get to the white shark, it's traveled all the way up the food web. And what that helps us do is that helps us understand the general health of the ocean and the ocean system, because they are accumulating those toxins at the top. And when you look at what Bob's doing here, it looks like the food they're eating down off your beaches impacts them a lot less than up north. And so when you go to the next slide, we've been able to use this model in 37 expeditions around the world. You can see we have been on several continents around the world and done a lot of trips. Right now, we are focused on the East Coast of the United States. Being an American, growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, spending time on the East Coast, the academic home of Osearch now is at Jacksonville University. Really felt committed to finishing solving the life history puzzle of the white shark in the North Atlantic on the eastern seaboard before we move the ship again. We got to finish so that NOAA has that data set to manage. Instead of having a halfway done project and then we go help Africa and scoot them along, and then we go back to Australia and scoot them along, I committed a number of years ago that we would not move the ship off the east coast of the United States until the scientists had the data they needed to solve this puzzle. And that's what we're in the middle of it. You can see from the slide that Bob showed you, we have a lot of pieces of the puzzle. We're really only missing a couple. We're missing mating, which we have good ideas about. And we're hoping to get some more data around that in the next year or two. And then we're really curious if the big females in Canada are going to give birth in a different place than Mary Lee showed us and Jack Casey's work led us to investigate. So be interesting to see if the Atlantic Canada has a different birthing site. And we got to nail down mating. We got some good clues on that, and we're hoping to make some big strides on that in the next year or two. But that has then manifested itself in these 37 expeditions, this collaborative approach in the next slide, where we now have over 55 peer-reviewed published papers. We have another more than 40 in progress. And so the system is working, the model is working. We are learning faster, more efficiently. We're overcoming this data deficit in time problem that was at the top of the presentation. And that has simply been by being collaborative, inclusive, and open sourcing. It has not been a complicated thing. It's just not the way that the traditional system works. Fortunately, our funding does not come from within the traditional system. So we're able to do things differently and more efficiently. And I'm really, really proud of these peer-reviewed papers. This is just a copy of our, of our mission statement. And, what I get really focused about is fearless innovation. I mean, look, we got no time. We have to have a sense of urgency. We got to learn what we've never learned before at a rate that we've never achieved so that we can deliver an ocean we're proud of to our grandkids. And that means we're going to have to be disruptive. That means if disruptive if an activity that is ocean first and grandchildren first is a disruptive activity, Osearch will be doing that. And that's really what has led us to really pursue this puzzle with a sense of urgency and allow us to make so much progress so fast. And I think with that, we'll go to the final slide and we'll slide into some questions.
Thank you very much. Excellent stuff. Always exciting and amazing to hear about what's going on. Plus, you have amazing photos and videos. Just great stuff to look at and such great stories to share. I mean, following Osearch online, hearing about the research that's happening here, listening to you and Bob talk, I just kept thinking, how come nobody thought of this sooner? If we have this, this big puzzle of what white sharks are doing, and these are big charismatic animals that we want to know a lot about, how did this model not happen in the past? Which you touched on a little bit, but.
And I think Bob could probably answer that better because he has a lot more history. But I think it has nothing to do with the people in the system. It's just the way the system worked. And I'll say a few things and pass over to Bob. Back in the day, the scientists had more funding. They had more ships. They had more capacity. And then over the years, a lot of that got stripped away, and moved into other governmental programs to the point where they didn't have the capacity and infrastructure they needed. And I'll pass it to Bob from there.
Well, I am going to disagree with Chris because the real reason is that we have a Chris Fischer. Nobody had a Chris Fischer before. And Chris called me in 2011, Chris, when Deepwater Horizon was happening, and he was out in the Pacific coast, and here I am in Florida trying to muster some kind of effort to look at the effect of the oil spill on in my case, on the shark population. And Chris calls me up and offers his ship. I'd never even met the man before. And he said, could you use my ship? And I said, let me think about this. Yes. So, because I'd seen it on some work from out there. Mm-hmm. But Chris is, he's an entrepreneur, but he's got the sort of the head of a scientist and the heart of a fisherman. And I think that the collaboration that we've put together with the people on board, it just really works, and it's very unusual. But beyond that, funding is always an issue, and Chris's approach, the OCEARCH approach to funding, is very unusual, and that's a lot of the scientists want to know, how do you do this? And Chris can talk about that. But I think really we lacked a sense of urgency, and Chris kind of brought that urgency to the table, and he met me, and I'm kind of a scientist that's kind of impatient. I'm not a slow, plodding guy that likes to sit in a lab for weeks on end and not see the light of day. I like to get out there and find the answers. So we ramped up the urgency because we knew. I mean, I grew up in the 50s and 60s and went to school in the 70s and 80s, and when I look back at the ocean as it was, and now look at it the way it is now, it makes me want to cry. And I know we've got to fix things. We've got to put some things back, and I know we can do it, and we are doing it. And how to do it wasn't so clear until Chris came along in my life and facilitated that. So, it's kind of like the urgency thing. It's almost like, I don't want to get too deeply into the subject, but it's almost like the COVID pandemic. Look at what the medical community is doing worldwide to mobilize, to figure out what's going on, to develop a vaccine. Everything has been accelerated 100-fold. And people are working together in ways and publishing faster than ever before. That's because of the urgency of the crisis. We have a pandemic in the ocean. We have a crisis in the ocean and with our shark population, and we've been addressing that now for the last almost 10 years and making great strides with this collaborative approach that's so unique to Osearch.
Excellent stuff. All right. I'll remind everybody watching, you can leave questions and comments in the chat boxes, and I'm going to start grabbing some of those right now. So type up your thoughts and let us know what's going on. Okay. First one is from Lee. Lee wants to know, does time out of water vary by shark species?
Chris, you want me to take that?
Sure, go ahead.
It can, sure. With the white shark, we really limit ourselves, and it's just an artificial limit that we impose on ourselves of 15 to possibly 20 minutes at the most on the platform. These animals could probably be on that platform for an hour or more. We don't want to test that, but they really chill out. Then there are some other species, some species like the black tip shark that's very skittish. They're a little bit more high performance animals, higher metabolic rates. You want to kind of work on those pretty quickly, get those back in. Hammerheads are a species that, depending upon the equipment that you have, can be a real challenge to keeping out of the water. You want to try to process them usually as quickly as possible. Although I know that, Chris, you had great success doing hammerheads, scalloped hammerheads, I think, down in Galapagos, and but the bigger ones seem to be difficult.
Yeah, the things we've learned with hammerheads, if you catch a great big hammerhead, unbeknownst to yourself, probably when you let it go, it's going to swim away and die. So they just are very fragile. We don't really work with hammerheads much anymore. And when I say big, I'm talking about like 14-foot great hammerheads, right? Yeah. Now the smaller ones, 8-footers, 9-footers, you can capture them, do quick work over the side of the boat and let them go. We've got some published peer-reviewed papers that came out with Nick Payne and Watanabe-san in Japan, which is where we figured out for the first time that they kind of swim on their sides because it's more hydrodynamic. We published a paper out of Australia about that. So generally speaking, I would think that the individual asked about time out of water. When you're working with a hammerhead, it's almost the one shark you don't really want to bring out of the water if you don't have to. These other sharks, like Bob was talking about, black tips, these white sharks, these things are super durable, right? And I would say that the large hammerheads are on the opposite side of the scale when it comes to durability.
Yeah, in addition to species, the other thing that's really an overriding factor is temperature, water temperature. And, we're lucky with the whites because they like pretty cool water. I mean, their sweet spot is in the low to mid 60s. But sharks that live in 70, 80 degree water or more Fahrenheit, they come in pretty hot and their metabolic rates are hot. So you want to try to handle those as quickly as possible and get them back on their way.
Nice. All right. Next one from Glenn. How long will a tracking device transmit data before the battery dies?
Well, the battery in the large spot tags is 5 years. In the smaller spot tags, it's about a year. Sometimes you can get a little more than that. In our internal acoustic tags, it's 10 years. Really, the challenge on the 5-year spot tag, when it comes to white sharks, is really just making sure you've got really good anti-fouling paint on it. I think oftentimes it's more difficult to prevent them from fouling for 5 years than it is worrying about your battery life. And then you get into some other species of sharks, like it would really probably surprise people. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. These white sharks, tiger sharks and stuff, they're like rooting around in the bottom. They're like rooting around in the bottom and rubbing up under rocks and digging in holes and stuff. And especially tiger sharks, they'll tear their kind of tear their tag off, rooting around in rocks and rolling around on the bottom. And so that can be a challenge more so than the battery life. I would say the biggest challenge is anti-fouling, making sure you can prevent stuff from getting on the tag. And this marine debris problem we have, this plastics problem, we know that's shutting down some of our tags, right? Because the shark swims through a plastic bag and it catches on the antenna, bends the antenna over, can't transmit data. You don't hear for a shark forever. Then all of a sudden you start hearing from it again, and so it came off or whatever. So it's a 5-year battery primarily on these big sharks that people are, but there's more to it than just battery life, right? Biofouling, anti-fouling paint, hugely important. And also marine debris, sometimes they'll get tangled up in long lines, and then that will catch on the tag and affect the tag. So battery is not really, I wish that it was just battery and every time we put one out, we knew we were going to get 5 years of data. That would be an amazing thing. But you'll see a lot of these tags, depending upon the body of water they live in, you'll get 3 years from the tag. And it's very interesting too for people to note. The more coastal a shark is, the warmer the water the shark is in, the faster it biofouls. So when you get these white sharks that live in cold, cruel water, and you get these big females that spend more time offshore in crystal blue water rather than the turbid water of the coastal areas, we'll have less biofouling and get more data out of those sharks than one that's like always in the river mouths and in the estuaries and that warm water with all that stuff in the water that can grab a hold of the tag and grow on it.
All right, let's see. Allie says, I think it's amazing that the female sharks go out to the deep ocean to gestate. Are there any guesses as to why they do that?
Well, it's a good question, Allie, if that's what they're doing, because you would think that the food resources wouldn't be as good out there for them. And obviously, when you're pregnant, you need to worry about food for your growing pups in this case. And we're talking about somewhere between 7 and 14 big pups growing inside of these big females. One of the leading explanations that we're working on is that once they mate, they don't want to be bothered anymore by the males, and they could be bothered if they stayed in that corridor that goes up and down on the coast there. So they leave to get away from the pestering, if you will, by males and perhaps even other females competing for food. One of the things that the scientists at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution who work with us at the University of Washington have found is that when these animals are going offshore out off the continental shelf, they're finding these warm water eddies that exist in the ocean that go down 1,000 meters, 3,000 feet or more. And they're diving down into these warm water eddies and probably getting access to food resources down there that are concentrated in these kind of cyclones of warmth and food. So they're taking advantage of that. They're possibly taking advantage of other food resources. They're staying away from being harassed, and then eventually coming back the following spring to give birth, we think, to their pups off of that New York area or some other places, as Chris said, that we're hoping to discover very soon.
Yeah, from those Atlantic Canada females. I think one thing that Bob noticed that he glossed over, and a lot of people don't think about, everyone spends time on the water, understands the largest migration in the world occurs every night when this deep scattering layer migrates to the surface of the ocean at night. Most people just think of it as squid, right? But it's more than just squid. And when you look at their dive profiles that the guys from University of Washington, Cam and Peter out there, brilliant scientists, discovered when they see, this is the thing about collaboration, right? We integrated a tracking, the spot tag, tracking of the sharks where it is, with another tag that tells you how it dives, right? The spot tag took us to the eddy. The other one showed us that they're diving down deep during the day, and then they rise back up at night. And they're following that deep scattering layer, which has a lot of things in it, like squid and ribbon fish and all sorts of other deep water fish. So while we think that there's not as much fish out there because it's not the same time we're used to chasing around in the coastal areas. There is a lot of fish. It's just down deep, deep, deep during the day and then comes up at night. And so, yeah, there's the difference between the two tags. The one that Bob is shaking right now is the spot tag.
It goes on the fin.
That goes on the fin. And then the other one is telling us the temperature of the water in and how deep they are. And so this is the thing about bringing the scientists together, right? You can learn one thing from one tag, one thing from another, but you put the two together, you learn a whole nother thing, which reveals the story of the life of the white shark. And that's why the collaboration has been so important.
Awesome stuff. All right, questions are rolling in hot. Okay, 9-year-old Noah wants to know, which is your favorite shark? They think it may be Mary Lee.
Well, I have my answer and Bob has his. Certainly for me, it's Mary Lee. Mary Lee was named after my mom. Mary Lee is what really lit up the whole East Coast to our work because she was very coastal. She spent a lot of times in the river mouths and estuaries right through the Carolinas, all the way from basically Massachusetts through Florida. Probably saved Osearch when we were transitioning off of television to more open sourcing. And so for me, it would definitely have to be Mary Lee, big, mature 17-foot, 3,500, 4,000 pound female.
Mm-hmm.
She also took us right into the New York, New Jersey bite under Long Island, which then kind of correlated with the great Jack Casey's work.
And for me, I always have trouble with this question. I get asked it all the time. And because I usually get asked, what's your favorite type of shark? What's your favorite species of shark? And I've worked on about 100 different species in every continent of the world except for Antarctica. And I worked on whale sharks, and they were wonderful during the period I was working on them. And hammerheads, we're still doing some work with hammerheads. This white shark study is been the crowning achievement of my career, working with Chris and the guys in a way that was never possible before. So if I had to pick one of the whites that we've tagged so far, I guess I would go with Unamaki, who's over my shoulder here, because I just love, as a biologist, we love to work with the big females, the big mature females, because they tell us so much. The males, we're not important. The females are the important ones for the population. They're the future of the population. So watching her right now, I'm excited to see where she's going to go. Chris probably gets tired of me texting him in the middle of the night, saying, look where Unamaki is now. And he does the same thing back to me on some other sharks. So it's great fun doing that, but she was amazing. She was huge. She was very cool on the platform up there. And Unamaki, by the way, is named after the Mi'kmaq, the indigenous people's name for Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. It means land of the fog. And it's a wonderful name, and it's a wonderful shark. So I'm just excited to see where she goes in the coming years.
I keep waiting, depending upon her track, if we're going to send out, the social post that says Unamaki is back in the Unamaki.
Nice.
I want to see the post where we say Unamaki has probably given birth. That's the one that I want to see.
Showed us where Atlantic Canada white sharks give birth. That's very possible.
Wow. Let's see. Bob, can you show us the tags again? Can you hold those up on camera?
Sure.
And Kelly was asking when these tags, I guess, either start to foul or the batteries go dead. Can you find that specific shark, and would you re-tag them?
Yeah. So, well, one question we get is, do the tags stay on the sharks forever? And the answer is no. In the case of a spot tag, and this is a smaller version of the one we put on the white shark. This is a 1-year tag. The one we put on is much bigger, 5-year tag. We use hardware that slowly corrodes and comes apart after the 5 years is up, and then the whole thing comes off. And we've seen some of the sharks that Osearch has tagged in the Pacific, see them years later. Chris can elaborate on that. And the fins have essentially completely healed. It has no effect on the shark. In the case of this pop-up tag, these actually separate from the shark. We program them to pop off the shark period of time, 6 months, perhaps sometimes as long as a year. And then the shark is free of them. As far as recatching the sharks, Chris, I don't think you guys have ever recaught one of your sharks that all around the world. Is that correct? One of the white sharks, at least. And I think people, when you look at the tracker, you see the locations, the pings, and it looks like, oh, you can go right out there and figure out where that shark is. But that's a big area of water that those pings are covering. So, Chris, you want to elaborate on the recapture?
Yeah, I mean, there's only been one time in all the years where we came upon a white shark that we had previously tagged, and that was in Guadalupe Island in 2009, where we came in and there was one of our sharks finning right there in the spot that we had tagged the previous year. No reason to capture that shark. It was just 1 year. Although now I think if we were there, we probably would have tried to capture that because we could have learned a lot about how much they grow in a year and things like that. But at the time we were like, nah, that's 1 year tag. We still got 4 years of tracking. It's already kind of done its thing. Let's leave that one alone. It's probably a mistake. But that was in the very early days of our work. We have seen, smaller sharks, like when you're working an area, you tag a hammerhead shark and it swims back by a few days later. But, it would have to be a gift from the ocean for us to say be out there working and Mary Lee swims up and we tag her again. If you think about trying to execute on a ping, even if you had a really high quality location that was within 100 meters or so, unless you happen to be floating in the ocean right then and there, you got no shot. I mean, by the time you get but these things move 100, 150 miles a day. So, by the time you ran down to your boat, jumped in it, got out there a half a day later, the thing's probably 50, 80 miles away. So it would really just have to be that, you figure out the pattern of these animals, you work in those regions and the seasons that they come through, and the ocean gives you a gift, and one that you had tagged previously just happens to swim up to you. Because, I mean, it's a needle in the haystack times the size of the ocean.
All right. I've got so many questions, and we're getting over time already.
Why don't we just do 3 more?
All right. I'll give you 3 more. We talked about Mary Lee. Any theories on why Mary Lee and Catherine swam into Pamlico Sound in North Carolina?
Well, Mary Lee, we know, was in Barnegat Bay up off of Jersey. Pamlico Sound is a little bit difficult to totally understand it. They love that Ocracoke. I hope I said that right. They love that river mouth, right? And so, when you go to those places, there's a tremendous amount of bait, right? On those outlets that get in that current game fish bait. So they're going to be in there feeding on that, balancing that system. So when you're in Ocracoke and you're having a huge bait run, there's going to be white sharks on it. When you're having a big game fish run, like if you have a black drum run down the beach, they're on it. When the red drummer, they're on that. And so, they're going to be moving in and out of those places. All of these white sharks, almost every time we see them when they're not on the move, right? They'll be in an area, living in an area for a while. They're there because there's an event that is occurring, some sort of aggregation of fish or marine mammals where they're coming in to balance that system. So always when we see a white shark, they'll start moving, ping, 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 ping. They're moving, then they pause. You're like, okay, you could call the local charter boat captains and they're going to be like, oh yeah, there's an incredible volume of whatever, could be as simple as menhaden or bunker, which is down there. So when they're moving in and out of those little areas around Ocracoke, it's because there's some sort of massive event occurring and they're on those events. And then when they're off the coast of the Carolinas, you could also call the charter fleet there and they'd be like, yeah, the bluefin are here now and they're going off and the white sharks are on that. So you got to really think about these things just like a lion, right? The wildebeest are migrating across Africa. The lions are on that, right? They're culling the weak, the dead, and the dying that fall out the back. They're on the impala birthing season, right? So the white sharks are on, the seal aggregations in late summer and fall. They're on the black drum run. They're on the red drum run. They're on the even big bait runs, right? It's not about the size of the fish. It's about the biomass in the area. They're on the bluefin when they're piled up offshore there. So when you see them pausing and living in an area for a while, they're on an event. And I think that Pamlico Sound thing is associated with events that are occurring just kind of right at those openings, because there's not that many openings in the Outer Banks. A lot of current pushes through them, which creates a lot of life, and the white sharks are going to be on that. Which is probably the same thing any fisherman in North Carolina could have told you.
Right. All right. Here's another one from Garland. Are white shark numbers still diminishing because of fishing or prejudices?
I'll leave that to you, Bob.
Well, I would say around the world, unfortunately, yes, the global trend is still decreasing. But the good news is that here on the east coast of North America, we know that the white shark population is on the rise. It's been on the rise since the mid 90s or so. And it's due to a certain number of things. It's due to removal of certain gear types in coastal waters where those young baby white sharks were getting caught as bycatch. It's due to less bycatch of the older animals, the bigger animals, and it's also probably due to an increase in their prey. And if you look at the marine mammals that they feed on up north, the seals, those animals have been protected for, well, all the way back into the 1970s here in the United States. And the white sharks were only protected beginning in the 90s. So the seals had a 2-decade head start, and in fact, their numbers are really exploding in certain places. So the combination of all those things has added up to an increasing white shark population. And some people don't think that's so great. If you're worried about white sharks along your beaches, you think that's not a good thing. But you have to understand that what we're doing is we're putting the oceans back in balance. It is a good thing. We need those sharks out there for all the reasons that Chris explained. And we can coexist with more white sharks. We can. We just have to be smart about it and how we use the oceans, and get the data that we need to advise the public as to when the white sharks are there and how to interact with them in the ocean. Chris,
I love that answer.
Well, all I would say is lots of big sharks means lots of fish sandwiches. No big sharks means no fish sandwiches. Do you want your great grandkids to be able to eat fish sandwiches? I would like mine to. Pretty simple.
I haven't had dinner yet. Stop talking about fish sandwiches.
Same here. Everybody else is having fish sandwiches watching the program right now. Those of us sitting right here, we're still waiting.
Send some over.
Okay, last one. Katie, thanks for throwing this question out there. Knowing all that you two know, how optimistic are you about the future for white sharks? And are there action steps you can leave all of us with?
Well, I'm very optimistic about white sharks on both our East Coast and West Coast. We seem to be trending in the right way. I think we're the model for the world. When you leave the United States, as Bob mentioned, other than a few other countries, it's kind of a wide open season on them. It's kind of a catastrophe, which I believe in the future is going to lead to a situation where we're actually going to be protecting our coastal waters because it will be the source of our food. And a lot of the other parts of the ocean are just being tapped out. I think things that people can do, there's really one thing is we all got to cut these single-use plastics out of our lives. You guys be done with it. Get a cup. No more plastic water bottles, no more single-use plastics. There's certainly room for plastics when you're using these things that last a long time. I'm talking about single-use plastics, right? Huge deal. Secondly, as we enter the era of conscious capitalism that we're all in now, more and more people are wanting to consume things from companies, like whether it's the shoes where you buy one pair of shoes and then they give a pair to someone who needs shoes, or whether you're buying a pair of Costa Osearch sunglasses and you're funding our ship, or a Yeti cooler who's funding our ship. These companies are smart. They get it, right? Nobody's going to need a pair of Costas or a Yeti cooler if there's not a bunch of fish in the ocean. So they actually spend money on trying to fund work to make sure there is fish in the ocean. It's in their best business interest. The more that all of us, as we choose with our dollars, that we buy from companies that are making business and doing good at the same time, right? Whether you need to buy a car and you're buying a car from a company that also feeds people who need to be fed, or you're buying anything. Focus on where you give your money to. Be a conscious capitalist. It really turns you into a lifelong philanthropist, and you're buying the things that you need anyway. Give it to the companies that are creating a more abundant, brighter future. Take a moment, in an era with a mobile phone and access to information, and you're looking at buying toilet paper, or you're looking at buying anything, buy from the company that's doing good, because what that's going to do is that's going to force every single company to make business and do good at the same time. And then we're going to harness the power of the Fortune 2000 and increase the capacity to learn quicker so that we can affect change sooner. And every single person is voting with their dollars every single day. make sure you're giving it to the most responsible company that makes whatever you were going to buy anyway, because you can always find one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I second all that. And to the first part of the question first, am I optimistic? And just like Chris, absolutely, absolutely. We already have seen success stories in shark populations, in especially in developed areas like the United States, when we really put our minds to it and have dedicated management. The problem is, yes, the problem is in some of these other areas around the world. We're making great strides in terms of international cooperation and international management. Very slow. We still seem to take steps backward. For example, the short fin mako, a cousin of the white shark, is now in trouble in the North Atlantic. We didn't think that was going to happen, but it has. So we've got to do something. A place that really has a real depauperate white shark population is the Mediterranean Sea, where white sharks used to be, if not abundant, at least they were fairly common. And we're hoping to take the ship over there in 3 or 4 years and help kickstart a new conservation and research program over there for the white shark. So very, very optimistic that with all of this work, we can do this. And as far as what everybody can do, Chris told you all the great things that can empower you as an individual, as a citizen, to help the oceans. And I would just say that as a scientist, I want to plea with you, and I'd probably preach to the choir here, since this is it's the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. But science has taken a pretty hard rap over the last, I would say, couple of decades. People are starting to turn away from science, and they're doing what they believe. People are basing their actions on beliefs and their opinions. We've got to focus on the data. We've got to focus on scientific information and use the scientific method. And by doing that, we understand the status of the environment. We understand what we have to do, and we can move forward. We can't just go by pure passion. So channel your passion for sharks into your mind, and make sure that when you read stuff on the internet, you vet that stuff, because not all the stuff on the internet about sharks is that good. Follow us on Osearch. Be part of our expedition. We invite you to be a member of our expedition virtually, which is probably the only way we could do it right now anyway. And watch us as we do our work and support that. You can support Osearch. There's ways to do that through the website. But basically support good science. We need good science in the United States. We need good science in the world for us to take care of this planet, because we're not doing a great job over the last couple of decades, and we can turn things around.
And we need this disposition, and I don't want to get too hoorah, but like optimism, am I optimistic? Look, we have to refuse any other result. We must win this. So if we're going to deliver for our kids, we got to refuse to give up. We got to operate with a sense of urgency, a sense of efficiency, and expect to win and do everything it takes to win. We have no choice, because it will be what we leave behind. So you got to take it seriously. You got to dig in. You got to have some grit. You got to refuse to lose. And I think that's a big part of why Osearch is where it is today.
Chris, Bob, thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Really appreciate all the work that you've done. My cat just ran across and spilled water onto my computer, so we'll see how long I last. Thank you so much. In 10 seconds, tell people how to find you and where to follow you.
Well, I think if you really want to watch some amazing, fun shark science, go to the Osearch YouTube channel with your families, and you can see all the work being done. And you can not only see the individual sharks being worked up, you can see Bob and his team and dig in on each individual type of science project that's more specific in those films. Track the sharks at ocearch.org. You all see where the sharks are at the same time as me and Bob and everyone else on the team. And, get involved in the conversation. The sharks have Twitter handles. You can ask them questions. The sharks have special underwater iPads made for us by Apple. They can tweet you right back with the information on where they are and what we think they're up to. And then tweet also, into our scientists like Bob and everyone else. Get involved in the conversation. It is going to take us all. And for the purpose of what we're doing, there is no me and you. There is just us. And what are we going to do about it?
Thanks again. Excellent show.
Thanks for having us.
Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Hope that you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the museum here on YouTube. That way, next Thursday night when we go live with the Science Cafe, you can get that notification that lets you know that we've got another great program going on. And you can follow the museum if you like on social media. We're at Natural Sciences on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. From all of us at the museum, again, thanks to our guests. Thanks to our digital media team for helping us run the show. And we'll see you all again soon. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Chris.